Today's idea of the day is how Apple and Microsoft can make Windows and macOS a little faster. I'm a tech guy, so I've watched a lot of things change in the computer industry since my first computer in 1979. And one thing that really hasn't changed or improved very much over all these years is the concept of the file system. Now, to put things in perspective, what's a file system? A file system is how the operating system, whether it's Windows, Mac, Linux, whatever it may be, stores information in essentially, it establishes how it's stored, and it creates a table of contents. And that's the important part here, the table of contents. The table of contents has evolved a little bit over the years. In the earlier versions of the DOS environment, and for that matter, just about every operating system before that, there's always been the concept of a file name, and they used to be limited to 8 characters. And once they got past that, they started to change things. The first version was kind of a little wonky. They kind of stored things in both 8 and a longer version of it. But the premise here is simply that there is such a thing as a file name in the file system, but there has never been, to this day, a true database to organize that. And by database, what I'm talking about is that every time you add a file, it should have a database, a real database. Now, I'm a SQL database guru. That's what I do for a living. I work in databases all day long. It seems to me that I can have literally 1 trillion records in a database, and using a real database like SQL Server, I can find a needle in a haystack in literally a fraction of a second. I mean, like 100th or 1 billionth of a second, practically, nanoseconds. In a blink, it can find one record exactly the way I want it in a database. But when I try to find the file name, even though I know the file name, it takes forever. It takes forever because indexing isn't a fundamental feature of the file system. Even to this day, on neither Mac or Windows, they have essentially left that out. And I understand part of the reason, because certain file systems are designed to be more universal. They could be inside of a camera, they could be inside of all sorts of other things, and they don't have the robustness of a real database. But the point is, for at least the main operating system's boot drives, and for any disks that are essentially part of that ecosystem, where they're actually part of a real computer environment, they should be storing this sort of information in a real indexable file system that is based on a database architecture, something that uses the same kind of indexing that's real time. Every time you add a file, updates the index. Every time you change a file, updates the index. So there should be I know some people are going to write me in the tech guys are going to say, well, Microsoft does have an indexing function. No, but it's not on by default, nor is it truly baked in. It's not there always and on demand. I would love to see a real file system, because devices are even getting faster. So let's say right now we have NTFS, we have exFAT, we have FAT32, we have macOS, which they have their own journaled file system. But it would be great if there a next gen, and it would be great if it was basically universal between all platforms, had a functionality where there's always a database element to it. And a camera could definitely keep up with that, because it's just taking sequential numbered things. It could update that index so that anything that reads and writes to this file system, just make it part of the protocol that when you write to this particular file system, it doesn't have to do a full text index of all the words on a page if it's documents, but at the very least, it should be able to catalog the most fundamental thing, the file name. And so today's idea today is that the file systems for the next generation of computers and devices should have a true database with nearly instant access that's always up to date and always accurate and always fast. So that's it. That's today's idea of the day. Yeah, some of them are better, I gotta admit. But if you really want to see a new idea each day, some of them are going to be good, some of them are going to suck. What are you going to do? Subscribe and visit ideaoftheday.com.